Hello, I'm Jim Hessler from Path Forward Leadership. I want to introduce you to a model that might help you gain a different perspective on what it means to be a leader in a growing organization. Now, paradoxically, growth can kill a business. And while the reasons for this can be many, it's clear that in many businesses, the talents, abilities, and habits of the leaders of that growing company fail to adapt to the new demands that the organization is putting on them. And that this failure of leadership to adapt is central, in many cases, to the organization's failure to grow or even to survive. Let's look at what we think is happening when our businesses grow, and let's consider a different way to think about that growth. This is the Path Forward organizational growth pyramid. Now imagine for a moment that this is an organization of 50 people. It could be the entire business organization, or perhaps just a branch or division of a larger company. And you can add zeros if you want. The fundamental concept of this pyramid works just as well with 500 instead of 50. You'll see as we go on. But at this point in the development, let's just say the organization has 3 levels, and as such, you as the leader are close to the customer. You work through relatively simple lines of communication, and you know everyone, or almost everyone, at some personal level. Now, the problems and challenges that you face every day in this organization, because it's small, are most often solved transactionally through relatively easy access to information and to experts who are never far away. The people in your organization of this size wear multiple hats typically, and your organization is likely to be located in just one or just a few physical locations. The people at the top of this pyramid, including you, are good at what they do. And this is evidenced by the fact that the organization is indeed growing. Now let's imagine your organization has grown in size to 150 people. Congratulations, the market's finding value in your goods and services, and you're delivering those goods or services effectively. But this growth obviously brings with it change, and change is something that you as a leader have to understand, absorb, and then lead others towards. Now let's draw one possible diagram that shows the way in which your organization has grown. So this is your 150-person organization. It's growing beneath you. You've added layers. You've added people. You have the same job, but it's in a bigger organization. You were the CEO or the GM before, you still are. You were the IT manager maybe, and you still are. Or you were the sales manager, and you still are. The organization has grown, and you have more people under you in the hierarchy. But it's likely that you have the same job title you had when the organization was smaller. You've added people, resources, and perhaps physical locations, but you might not have added the leadership skills and awareness that you need in order to lead this transformed organization. We believe it's helpful to reframe what's happening when growth occurs. And we'd like to suggest that this model of this pyramid that grows in a downward direction might not accurately reflect what's actually happening. Now, as a human being, you're hardwired to put into practice again and again those behaviors that have worked for you in the past. You're very comfortable here at the 50-person level. But that explains exactly why this model of growth isn't accurate, because it implies that the biggest changes in the organization have occurred below you in the hierarchy and below the other senior leaders in the organization. So let's take that same 150-person pyramid and represent it in a more accurate way. The difference is profound. In this model, we see that the bottom levels of the hierarchy, except for possibly being more specialized and perhaps more physically separated, are doing work that's similar to the work that was being done at this level in the smaller organization. What has changed the most are your job and the jobs of your senior leaders, and unless these lower leaders make the transition, unless you and these other lower leaders make the transition, the organization will be stuck with the leadership capabilities of a much smaller organization. As you look at this model, you can see that some of the key second-tier leaders may end up leading sections or departments of the organization that are larger than the entire organization was when they started in their current job. This transition of scope and complexity is significant. And I'd like to point out some of the reasons why it's challenging for you and your team. What are the elements of leadership that might need to change in order for you to grow with your organization? Now, in describing these growth characteristics, I am focused largely on the top levels of the hierarchy, the C-level, director, GM, department managers, etc. However, everybody else in the organization will take the lead of those top leaders, and the organization will naturally follow the lead of whoever's at the top. That makes sense, right? So the most important principle of all, though, before we get into the habits that need to change and the skills that need to be developed, is to understand that the organization cannot grow beyond the capabilities of its leaders. And I'd suggest you keep those words near you as you face the challenges of growth. Over the years, I've seen many, many examples of organizations that grew and shrank and grew and shrank, or perhaps stalled. And in most of these examples, I was able to see that the constraint to growth was leadership. Leadership is the engine of growth. And in too many organizations, that engine just doesn't produce the necessary horsepower. So if you want your organization to grow or to continue growing, you have to grow. Or you have to get out of the way so others can lead in ways that you can't. And if you continue to be at or near the top of this new, bigger pyramid, you also have to make sure that you're holding other leaders in your organization responsible and accountable for doing the same, for achieving the same growth on their own. Now, growth sometimes happens gradually, and you might not be fully aware of what's changing around you. In essence, you may have been promoted to a position of greater responsibility simply because the organization has grown around you, and not necessarily because you were carefully vetted as the best choice for the new job. Now, here are some of the leadership shifts that occur as an organization grows. Number one, strategic orientation. In the smaller organization, you might get away with running it without a strategic plan. But now you need one. Even if your organization is just a division or a branch of a larger organization, and even if that company doesn't have a strategic plan, you can still develop a meaningful plan for your area of the business. Being a strategic thinker requires you to ask the hard questions, to question every assumption you've made about how to make your business thrive. No matter what level of leadership you occupy, you can never lose control of the business fundamentals. But as the organization grows, you need to give more and more control of those fundamentals to others and focus your energies on the bigger picture. The second big change, number two, is cultural awareness. Now, in the 20 years in which Path Forward has been working with business leaders, we've become more and more focused on the ways that culture works to shape the success and the future of an organization. We like to ask this question: why do the people in your organization act the way they do? And we strongly believe that one of the most important answers to this question has to do with the culture, what people are experiencing when they walk into the building in the morning. So if you don't fully understand your culture, or you think you understand it and you aren't willing to be curious about it, you can't feed it and grow it or change it as needed. If you don't pay attention to culture, if you don't understand culture, it will become what it wants to become without your conscious attention and leadership. Culture is something that builds organically in a smaller business. But as the leader of a larger organization, you need to make sure the culture builds intentionally. That's a big difference. Number 3, communication. And you may consider yourself a good communicator at that 50-person level, but this is significantly more challenging. We often say that in order to be an effective communicator in a large organization, take what you think is enough communication and then triple it and then double that. You now have a lot of people waiting to hear from you one way or another, and even if you rarely interact with them in person. In the larger organization, it's easier for people to feel uncertain. They can't see your face or key off of your body language like they did when you were smaller. Now you need to be authentic, open, and engaging with your people. But with more people, that has to happen in a more intentional fashion. So what does it mean to be a great communicator in a large organization? It means you repeat yourself a lot, that you take every opportunity to teach and reinforce key company norms and strategies, and that you never ever assume you know what your employees know or don't know. It means you spend a lot of your time talking to people and talking to them about big, important issues and questions. Number 4 is focus. As the organization gets bigger, you will need to get more and more focused. There will be more and more noise, more and more distractions, and you'll need to keep some amount of quiet, contemplative space around you in order to think at the level you need to think. Paradoxically, as the organization speeds up, you may need to slow down. Your ability to observe, to analyze, to play with new ideas, and to calmly and non-judgmentally listen to your people and your customers will now define your success as never before. You will now need to teach the organization how to best interact with you. They will need to be more concise and thoughtful in how they bring information to you or in how they ask you for a decision. Your time as a leader in this larger organization becomes extremely valuable. As we say in our Path Forward Leadership Workshop, your intentions need to be the intentions of a leader, and you need to spend your time accordingly. Sometimes this means you have to step away from what you love doing and do the things instead that are in greater service to the organization. Number 5, you must be relationally courageous. And what we mean by that is, as the organization has grown, you've formed powerful relationships with the colleagues who've helped make that growth happen. Now, they deserve your appreciation and regard. What they don't deserve is to be promoted only because of what they've done in the past. You must be courageous in choosing the team that will take the organization to the next level, even if that doesn't include some rock-solid, hard-working people whom you care for and admire. And as you look at this organizational growth pyramid, look at it with clear eyes, considering what's best for the organization rather than what's best for any individuals in the organization. And of course, if you're part of a family business, this may include some very tough decisions about family members, people who might have earned your appreciation without necessarily earning a higher position in the hierarchy. You cannot run a great organization if you insist on building it on top of your historical relationships with coworkers. This is one of the very toughest parts of making this leadership transition, but it may, in the end, be the most important. Number 6, your ego must be in the proper perspective. Now again, what happens when we're successful? We tend to build a story around our success, or an egoic interpretation of why we've been successful. And when we tell this story, we want to repeat it again and again because it felt so good the first time. Now, this is your ego in charge in an unhealthy way. Your ego just wants you to feel good. And it will resist any attempt to change your positive story. In fact, you should feel proud of your accomplishments while at the same time recognizing that what's past is past. And what made you successful won't always make you successful. Take your good and useful attributes forward into the future, your work ethic perhaps, or your salesmanship, or your ability to read the P&L upside down and sideways. These things may very well be useful, and being good at them is part of your identity. The challenge is that this egoic identity may result in you resisting the changes you need to make. The biggest and most challenging part of this ego consideration is the part about being completely honest with yourself about your ability and your interest level in moving from here to here. Even with your best efforts and intentions, you may not be the best person for this job, even though you were great at this one. And if you are the right person for this job, you need to surround yourself with a higher quality of people than you ever have before. People who are better than you are, and maybe some who move faster than you move. As I ascended the corporate ladder, I positioned myself as the least essential day-to-day employee in my organization. I wanted to be the guy who could step away for a couple of weeks, and no one would notice, and the business wouldn't lose any speed or effectiveness in my absence. And some of you will have a hard time letting go of this vision of yourself as essential. The seventh and last change in the list is a change towards a more systemic orientation. And at this point in your growing organization, you need to put more and more emphasis on systems and processes. You have to see business outcomes as a result of systems as much as you see them as outcomes of the efforts or capabilities of the individuals in the organization. In your smaller organization, you can track tactical activities back to the source, and you can try to solve problems one by one, person by person. In your new role, you must orient yourself to looking at systems as much as people. You have to lead a process of designing the business, not only for its current needs, but for its future needs. Look forward to your organization growing again and design that future state company now. What does it look like structurally? What types of organizations, resources, and business practices will set you up for future growth rather than just catching up each time you grow? No matter what the size of your current organization, you have to have a vision of it as something bigger than what it is. And what does that bigger version of your organization look like? You need to be answering that question now. So these are just 7 of the leadership challenges I believe most of you will face as your organization grows. There are others that may be unique to your situation. But the most important principle in this model is that of awareness. The awareness that leadership evolves and grows as the organization grows, and that this growth of leadership capabilities needs to be a planned and intentional process, not just a reaction to the growth that's happening. Whether you've already grown or are planning to grow, take a look at the growth through this lens. And remember that the organization cannot grow beyond the capabilities of its leaders. Path Forward would love to help you with this growth challenge, and we'd love to hear any comments or suggestions or questions that arise from this video. Thanks for listening.